Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Multiverse 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was betrayed by Konoha and became a king? Part 1. A blonde-haired boy, no older than 19 years of age, awoke on a king-sized bed, the blood-red covers getting shoved over as he awkwardly sat up, the rays of the sun glared in his closed, blue eyes, a natural alarm clock signaled that the morning had arrived. With a hand he brushed his calm, lifeless-looking blonde hair out of his eyes as he rubbed his tired eyes. Last night really took strain on him. A muffled knock was heard on the large doors to his right. With heavy eyes he turned his head to face the noise. "Come in," the boy managed to yawn out, looking at the tall, slender old man who walked in. He wore a butler's uniform, his hair was a dark gray and was kept short, and bore a small mustache in the same color. His name is Mitsuhide Tsunaka, and is the head servant within the palace walls, overseeing the events, which take place in its walls. He was also a close confidant to the boy, and is completely loyal towards him. What should be most interesting about him is the fact he was once considered to be a great warrior back in his youth, and a true servant in the way of Bushido, the way of the warrior. He was once a member of the Bushido 7, a group of samurai which were renowned for trying to keep the chaos contained in the West countries and protect the innocent from the wars, but he is now the only survivor. Now he uses his knowledge and experience to help train the boy in the arts of war, which proved to be vital during his campaign. "My apologies if I woke you up, Your Imperial Majesty," he spoke in a clear, aged tone. "Did you sleep well?" The boy just chuckled in response. "Not really, Mitsuhide-san, my head's still spinning from that late-night party," the blonde replied as he slowly got to his feet and, after a stretch, walked over to the large wardrobe in the corner of the room. Upon opening it, he grabbed one of his many highly decorated white suits, which was complete with a double blazer, white pants, a white long-sleeve shirt and a white tie to match. On his feet he wore white trainers. He grew out of sandals and found shoes too uncomfortable for him. He had golden shoulder boards fixed to his shoulders, and had an embodied sash running from his right shoulder to the left side of his waist. He then walked over to the wooden screen, which was placed next to the wardrobe. "Well, Your Imperial Majesty, yesterday was a big event, as it was the second anniversary of this empire's unification." "Ah yes, the unification of the Western Empire, known throughout the elemental countries as the Empire in the West. It all would never have happened if the current emperor, the young boy, were betrayed by his home. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the founder and first emperor of this empire. Time was kind to Naruto, for he no longer looked the idiotic young boy he once was, but instead a tall and proud young man. Gone were the whisker marks that told the tale of his previous fate, and his hair was no longer spiky, but calm and lifeless. How did it all start? It began when he successfully retrieved the last Uchiha, Sasuke Uchiha, back to the village hidden in the leaves, also known as Konoha. However, despite having being incredibly loyal to his home, he was rewarded with scorn and banishment. The reason? Releasing the nine-tailed fox and the attempted killing of the Uchiha. Now this didn't hurt him. In fact, he was glad to be away from the spiteful village, but what hurt him was that everyone he thought he could trust, everyone he thought was his friends and family, betrayed him. Tsunade had scowled him for the injuries Sasuke had received, despite being personally injured himself. His sensei, Kakashi Hatake, had left him to rot. His teammate, Sakura, had shunned him, as did the entire Rookie 9, and most of all, Iruka, his big brother, and Jiraiya, his godfather. Only Tsuki and Ayame remained his friends, but even they couldn't help due to heavy pressure brought onto them. The only other person who never truly betrayed him was Hinata. In fact, she confessed her love to him only before his banishment. It hurt him to know he could now never return her feelings. Soon after he left the village, word got out that Tsunade had told the whole village of Naruto's dark secret, and so he was sure she would hate him as well. But he soon realized how blind he was when he was out of the village for good. It was like the wool had been removed from his eyes, he could see clearly. Now, compared to popular belief, he wasn't the idiot he made himself out to be. It was a mask, a self-defense mechanism to use against the villagers who hurt him over the years. Now he had no need for it, and so he was free. He also found out his heritage before his banishment. How? The small scroll that appeared mysteriously in his apartment. He could remember how shocked he was to find out he was the son of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and it strengthened his hatred towards Konoha. How much more had it kept from him? The scroll also contained the family fortune and the scrolls of his father, including the art of seals, which now he is a master of. But it was his mother's scroll which he was deeply shaken at reading. Not only did she herself hold the Kyuubi when she was alive, but she was also related to the former daimyo of Whirlpool Country. This shook him to the core. He was practically royalty in terms of where he came from, but instead he was treated like dirt. What hit him hardest, however, was finding out that Madara Uchiha was the one who sparked everything of, even having had a hand in his mother's demise. For making him lose everything before he even had it, Naruto swore revenge. But he wasn't alone on his travels. The very demon inside of him was his only true companion, and had a close relationship. Ironic that the demon was the only one he could truly trust. Naruto found out how the seal that bound him worked, and after a year of hard labor, freed him from his prison, complete with all 9 tails of power. Now he could have left Naruto to get his revenge on the one who controlled him that fateful night, Madara Uchiha, but he stayed with the boy, out of a sense of duty, and began to teach him many things, not just in the ways of ninja, but also in many other aspects of life. So this came useful when he gained an ambition which would make him the most powerful ruler on the continent. To the west of the known elemental countries, things were done much different in many aspects. This vast land, though far larger than the eastern counterpart, was also far less stable. The eastern countries were in fact the only place of stability on the land mass, and it was in small pocket compared to the rest of the continent, primarily due to the fact the eastern countries managed to settle down and develop. In the rest of the lands, dubbed by the East as the primitive West, things were different. Firstly, since the shinobi wars hadn't gotten near these lands, the population was higher because there were no great wars to diminish human life. Also, the first shinobi war saw the end of the samurai era as the dominant force, but only in the eastern pocket. To the west, both ninja and samurai worked together to create a strong, military force for which all the small western countries used. But the biggest difference was in fact a flaw of the western part of the continent. Unlike the east, where there was strong central governments that held power, such as the daimyos, the west was nearly a lawless and chaotic place. Countless local warlords rose up and took power away from the daimyos, leaving them powerless and without authority, and used their newfound power to terrorize and control the countries. These warlords even sought to expand their power and declared war on other warlords, fighting over land and resources, especially in the northern parts. And while the wars were less frequent, it didn't mean they were less fierce. Instead, many small skirmishes were fought and many battles resulted in both sides losing many soldiers, and usually also resulted in the death of one or both warlords participating in the fight. However, there would always be another warlord who would rise up and take the place of his predecessor. Naruto saw the lawlessness of the land, and together with Kyuubi, sought to bring peace to the war-torn continent. He became first known throughout the land when he challenged and killed one of the most dangerous warlords, Nobunaga Oda, in a duel, a warlord who easily was one of the most powerful due to having the biggest size of territory compared to his rival lords. While he was considered a godsend to the people in the land, having liberated them from the vile warlord, to the other rulers it was a different story. To them, he was merely considered to be a young, naive fool going out of his depth, and was thus entitled by the other warlords and daimyo, as the Eastern Fool. How wrong they were. This did not stop him, however, and as he began to take on and defeat the neighboring rulers, one at a time. All the while he began to see changes in his old beliefs of battlefield tactics. The most prominent was that he no longer saw the prospect of having small-sized elite groups, or in fact a one-man army, like in the East, as prominent enough to bring victory. Instead, he saw that many, well-trained troops and new technologies that are coordinated and combined properly and appropriately could easily overcome any foe. This was seen in the skirmish of Nagata Ridge, which his forces defeated the forces of the infamous warlord of Yoshino Imikugara, using a combination of battalion formations containing a variety of archers, spearmen, and the use of explosive detonations to trap and destroy the enemy. Yoshino did not survive. A few years later he was arguably the most powerful lord in the West, after he swept through the other warlord lands, and like a selective plague killed many of the tyrannical lords. Of the course of his war, many coalitions were formed to try to stop his growing power. The first coalition was the only one to prove any challenge to him. Soon after, any coalition formed was simply swept aside. Finally, soon after the fall of Kyoto and the Ashikaga shogunate, many of the remaining rulers who had not fallen united in a grand, final coalition in a last gambit attempt to defeat the boy before he was able to solidify his power. But Naruto was no longer the hot-headed genin that came from the East, but now was a great strategist of near unrivaled skill. This was seen in the climatic battle of Nashogiro, the final great battle Naruto fought in the West. At the start of the battle, the blonde constantly outmaneuvered the coalition forces that sought to depose him. The coalition had many lords involved, and as such, while the battle went to and through, the turning point of the battle when he lured the hot-headed warlord Shiraya Takeda's forces, compromising primarily of cavalry formations, into the open plain, and destroyed them using a combination of the standing spear wall formations, to stop the cavalry in their tracks, and then having the archers' formations fire wave upon wave of arrows to bring them down. After this disaster of losing their primary cavalry force, the coalition began to crumble. Naruto's forces soon began to overwhelm their defenses one position at a time, before going to the final thrust to victory, claiming many of the coalition leaders' lives in the process. After this, their lands were easy to take. Once the coalition fell, there was never another coalition to rise against him. After seeing the climatic defeat of the coalition, many of the other rulers, which had not joined, sorted best to join Naruto rather than lose everything. After negotiating with them, the boy's lands grew as what remained of both warlords and daimyo alike rushed to swear loyalty to him, hoping that they would be able to keep their lands as reward for their loyalty. In the end, Naruto's empire stretched from the elemental borders to the western shoes, an extremely long distance. While several of his major victories did come from wars, it was his diplomatic tongue that was his greatest asset. He would use his skills of negotiation, taught thanks to Kyuubi, to not only diffuse situations and play one foe against another, but also to gain allies, then vassals, then retainers. This happened when Yasunaga Hattori and the Hattori clan became a close ally to him when he first rose to power. The Hattori clan were a ninja force unlike any other in the West. Their abilities, while made them feared, also made them targets by those who felt threatened. Soon after Naruto managed several expansions, they were under threat of the Takeda, who swore if they were captured, they would be killed. To survive against this, they accepted becoming a vassal to Naruto's power in order to ward away the threats of the stronger clans. It was when Yasunaga died that his son Hanzo took over, and he had his own clan swore loyalty to Naruto. Examples of this also happened with the Sanada, Hojo, and Fukushima clans, which all in turn swore loyalty to him as his power expanded. His biggest form of support, however, was not from the clans, lords or daimyo, but came from the people of the war-torn lands. To them he was a hero, fighting for them, for their beliefs, and for their dream of peace. Some even rose up and tore down their ruling classes in order to side with the boy. And so, after nearly 5 years of unification, and seeing their own lives slowly begin to improve thanks to a peace never seen before, it was only natural that they would want him to become their ruler. Their emperor. To say Naruto was greatly pleased with his accomplishments, he created an empire that made the eastern countries combined look tiny in comparison. He took his place on the political stage with the other nations to the north and across the seas, and he gained many friends and comrades during that time. He also gained many new allies and warriors, who helped bring his country's military might to be an inspiration to others who looked in awe. However, even after all these accomplishments, the one thing that still eluded him was the thing he wanted most, which was denied to him all his life: a loving family. The empire itself, due to its vast size, had a great variety of different population densities, along with different ethnic groups. The empire was essentially divided into 5 regions. In the center of the empire was the capital, Kyoto. Here Naruto ruled the Western Empire in his palace. The palace was constructed by the vain Ashikaga shogun, who ruled the region with an iron fist and had much of the territory's resources used for his own pleasures. A large palace of great magnificence, it was built at the cost of those living in the city, draining much of its resources to build. Naruto was able to capture this city, and the palace, intact, and now used it for his own design. The 2 of the 3 most populated centers also were in the center of the empire, they being Osaka and Edo. The central region had little urban development, but it was the center of expanding ideas, and Osaka was considered the city of development for the empire, due to the large amount of guilds within its walls, which focused upon research and development. The third, Awari, was in the eastern region of the empire, and was a strong defensive base due to its close proximity to the eastern countries. The eastern region was a place with large rural areas with few urban towns and cities. These, however, were all fortified, as it was in the eastern region where some of the strongest warlords had made their base before Naruto appeared. The eastern region is primarily a military area due to its high population density, and most of the military forts being built for the empire were located in this region. The western region was by far the largest of the regions, and such was considered to be the most important after the central region. It had many trade ports within the empire, which brought in vast material wealth as well as knowledge from countries far beyond the sea. The city port of Xuancheng, which was considered to the region capital in terms of trade, was the most influential in these terms as it brought into the empire the majority of the foreign goods. The western region also held the highest population of the regions, covering both urban and rural areas. While not gathered, as there were few cities in the region, and none as densely populated as the 3 population centers, there were certainly many more small cities, towns and villages than anywhere else in the empire. However, 2 regions were a constant problem for Naruto, the northern and southern regions. Both had suffered severely during the War of Unification, but also new problems had arisen, both internally and externally, made both regions the hardest to govern, but also put strain on the empire's already low resources. There are 2 reasons why Naruto is intent on holding on to them, however. The northern region is highly rich in natural minerals. Great quantities of copper, ore, and gold were being found all over the north, and much more was being discovered. Some of this appeared shortly before Naruto's ascension, but after being persuaded by his advisors to search for any more mineral hotspots, the region was soon covered with many mines to extract these precious minerals. While the western region also held high quantities of minerals, the northern region's mineral wealth was considered to be more accessible. Soon the empire would benefit greatly when enough was extracted, not just from the northern, but also the western region. The problem was that it was on the border next to the religious Siren Empire. Tensions have been high between these 2 great powers and war seems to be close to inevitable. The southern region on the other hand was plain and bare, but this vast, empty plain, the location would be perfect for creating many farms and livestock. The people in the south were naturally rural, and so to create vast farms to help cultivate the empire's ever-growing demand for resources would prove vital in the years to come. The system of government that the emperor used to rule this immense empire was quite complex. At the top of the vast bureaucracy, it involved 3 branches, each with its own style of appointment and its own level of power. The first is to be the House of Representatives, but is more commonly known as the House of Commons. The reason for this is that the people themselves elected all the members of the House. Naruto understood the value of democracy when it came to ruling the land, so it was best to give the people a voice when it concerned their well-being, and also guaranteed his popularity amongst the masses. The second was the more prestigious Senate, which contained those who could be considered wise individuals, as all the members were experts in their own fields. This branch was appointed by the emperor himself, as it would be useful to have such experts in the government. Finally, the third branch was the House of Lords. This branch contained all the lords and high-ranking nobles, which had sided with Naruto during the wars, as a promise that he would restore their power if they joined. The House of Lords is considered to be the smallest of the branches, due to how few lords actually joined with the boy emperor, but it is in fact the one he works most closely with. While these branches did hold great sway over the empire, it was the emperor who held the most power, if all the power, as it was he who had final say over what decisions to take. In this form he was essentially an autocratic ruler, who wielded unlimited legislative and executive power, who had essentially delegated some powers to the branches to keep them happy. The emperor himself worked with a cabinet with individuals who worked on certain areas, such as agriculture and justice. Within this cabinet contained what was considered to be the leaders of the 3 houses, the Speaker of the Representatives, the Speaker of the Senate, and the Lord Speaker of the House of Lords. So far this form of government has been effective, and so it looked like it wouldn't change soon. And so 2 years since the unification of the western lands, Emperor Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was getting ready for an important meeting with one of his daimyo allies, who had regained some of their former power under the boy's leadership, just as he promised them. Upon putting his tie in place and put a golden amulet on the top of the tie, he walked out from behind the screen and looked towards the sharp-dressed man. I must admit even in my youth we never had a party like that. I guess this is what peace and prosperity brings you. Naruto smiled at his old-aged head servant. Well, it goes to show what you can do when everything goes as planned. He turned to his chief servant. Shall we go then? He asked Mistuhide, who bowed in response. Grinning, the boy walked past the man as he fixed his white gloves, which had strange markings on the back side of his hands, and headed to the corridor in the palace, his chief servant behind close him. Walking out, he gazed at those ready to meet him. Naturally, 12 huge figures stood at attention. These men are the Praetorian Guard. What greater bodyguard could there be to a ruler of Naruto's caliber? They are 12 among the greatest warriors in the empire, who are in fact rumored to be some of the first to bow before Naruto, and have been rewarded with his complete trust. Armed with golden, highly decorated armor that has symbols of the eagle upon its surface, and are armed with both a halberd in their hands and a sword in its sheath, they are ready to take on any foe. These were created by the greatest of the empire's smiths that surpass even current modern achievements, and supported by magical seals to increase toughness and decrease the weight. It is said that even one of these warriors would even give a Kage a challenge in single combat, but that has yet to be seen. Eternally loyal, these men would literally, and gladly give their lives to protect the Grand Emperor of the West. Also there to greet him is Lord Komei Ishida, the head of the Empire's civil service. He wears a bright white business suit that is trimmed yellow, with white gloves and black shoes. His hair is a short brown, along with his eyes. On his chin is a small beard, which is short, showing it hasn't been growing for long. Komei is Naruto's chief of staff and coordinator of the mass bureaucracy within the empire, which helps manage the mass flow of information. If anyone wants an audience with the Emperor, they have to speak to him first, for he is the one that helps organize Naruto's daily schedule. Even members of the government have to speak to him first to be granted an audience. Considered to be one of the most powerful men in the empire, Naruto trusts him due to the fact he has no real political ambitions. They, however, on their surface only had professional relationship. Privately, he has helped Naruto through many situations in dealing with the often divided government. He bows his head in respect to Naruto. "Your Imperial Majesty, how are you this morning?" he asked, raising his head to see Naruto with a smile. "Fine, Lord Kome Dono, so what's this day's agenda?" Kome handed Naruto a piece of paper, which essentially showed him of what is going on today. The first order of business is the meeting with the lords of the northern region. Naruto was glad this was to be dealt with first. When the Western Empire came into being, the neighboring Siren Kingdom to the north, seeing this new empire as a threat, has been launching raids to disrupt the northern provinces, but also to try and get at the resources being discovered. Though significantly smaller than Naruto's empire, they were proving to be a thorn in his side. Any attempt at trying to come to terms with the Emir, the ruler of Siren, has failed. Naruto was afraid that soon, if these raids were not stopped, it could spill into all-out war. As large as the Western Empire was, it was not ready militarily, economically, or even culturally ready for another war. This meeting with the northern province lords was to hopefully find ways of strengthening the borders, as 2 imperial legions had already been directed at the north to try and gain a measure of control on the situation. It was obvious to many people in the top of the empire, including the emperor himself, that the only thing at the moment keeping the empire safe was its size. Far bigger than any nation, and even combined it would still be small. The size of the empire gave of a feeling to invincibility to the rest of the nations. However, if they knew what exact was happening within the sense of power would diminish. While the economy was stable, and growing quite exponentially, it was relatively weak when considering the size of the empire. The economy would have in fact been dismal if it was not for the fact that many of the daimyos hadn't surrendered to Naruto. While this created a problem in regulating the provinces as it would require new appointments, the fact is much of the land's wealth was now in Naruto's hands, and not in the pockets of the individual provincial lords. Due to this advantage, he would be able to spend it when it would be most needed. Adding to this, work still had to be done on both the infrastructure and the empire integrity. Even after a few years of unification, things were rocky at best. Furthermore, the military strength of the empire was currently feeble. When local lords or daimyos had armies, it was primarily made up of ashigaru, or peasant soldiers. Only few samurai were actually seen on the battlefield, and there was a major difference between a peasant with a spear and a trained soldier with a katana. As such, the emperor has attempted to train a properly standing force that consisted of trained samurai over ashigaru forces. However, to train an army vast enough to protect an empire as large as the Western Empire would take a great amount of time and resources to create. Overall, while it looked formidable, the Western Empire was in a relatively vulnerable position, and would remain so for some time till it began to bear the fruits of the people's labor. Then it would become the power it is rumored to be. Before Kome could continue to talk about the schedule, however, a voice rang out through the halls of the imperial palace. "Your Majesty." Naruto turned his head to see another dressed man running towards him. He was clean-shaved and had short black hair. "My apologies for interrupting your schedule, but there is a long white-haired man who wishes to see you. He says it is urgent." Naruto signed in annoyance. He turned to the other man next to him. "Tell the lords of the northern provinces I will be slightly late for the meeting." The man bowed and walked off to perform his duty. The young emperor walked with the other man down the long hall to see whom this stranger was, and what he wanted that was so urgent. "Did he say who he was?" he asked inquisitively. The man shook his head. I am afraid not, Your Majesty, he replied. He only said he was from the eastern countries. I think he said it was Fire Country, and he was here on goodwill. Naruto stopped in his tracks, causing the servant to turn around. Is there something wrong, sire? He asked. Naruto's features darkened. If this man was from Fire Country, then there was a chance he came from that place. We shall see, he muttered to himself. They proceeded to continue walking to where this man was, followed by Kome and the 12 guards. Finally, they reached the doors to the guest room. The man walked to the door and grabbed the handle, opening it for the blonde. Upon stepping into the room, he saw a long-haired man wearing red, his back turned as he stared out the window. Hearing the door open, the figure turned, and smiled at how he saw. Hey there, brat, how's it been? Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he recognized the voice. Before he gave the man a heated glare, his voice filled with both anger and hate as he growled out the man's name. The glare told the members of the Praetorian Guard that this man was trouble, and readied themselves against him. Jiraiya. Naruto was usually a patient man. When he played the long wars for unification, he forced himself, with the help of his old friend Kyuubi, to learn the value to patience. Thanks to this long patience he now has, it helped him greatly in his war. Now he was a man who rarely lost his temper to anyone, or even lashed out when something took too long, like in his genin days. But even that long-gained patience was lost when he looked at the man that used to be his godfather. It showed that when hate runs deep, it could make your patience quickly disperse. Thinking back, he realized this is how Sasuke must have felt with Itachi. Naruto stared at who was meant to be his godfather with absolute, burning hatred in his eyes. This man, the same man who had betrayed him 7 years ago, had forgotten his promise to his father Minato, and now had the shocking nerve to just waltz into his palace, and call for him, when he had other, far more important, matters to attend to. Jiraiya on his part looked deeply unnerved at the killing intent being directed at him by the young boy. He began to squirm uncomfortably and had looked down, trying not to look into the boy's eyes that told him he far from welcome here. That and the fact that 12 large men in armor, pointing their weapons directly towards him, also brought that belief of being unwelcome home. What are you doing here and what do you want? I would advise you speak quickly, for I am a very busy man, the blonde managed to say through gritted teeth. He really didn't want to waste his time on this old pervert who abandoned him all those years ago. Naruto, please let me explain. The old man tried to reason with the boy, only to have it backfire in a spectacular way. Explain. Explain what? Naruto finally let loose the raging currents of anger, making the old man suddenly feel small. Explain why you never appeared in the first 12 years of my life like you promised my father and mother. Explain the reason why they left me, like the rest of Konoha. Explain why you never told me of my heritage. Explain the reason you betrayed my parents' memory by not acting as a godfather. Explain why you think you can just appear in my palace univited. Jiraiya visibly flinched at the torrents of anger being directed at him, while at the same time Ishida and Mitsuhide both took steps back from the burst of anger. Never before had they seen their emperor so angry before. Now Jiraiya felt like a clown. He really was a fool to abandon Naruto in his time of need, when he needed a shoulder to lean on, a pillar of strength. Instead, he abandoned him like all the others that were his supposed friends. Now he was paying that price right now with a less than even a neutral welcome, and he wouldn't be surprised if he had to fight his way out. Looking at the 12 men in golden armor, he paled slightly, knowing it would be a difficult task. He watched as Naruto, with his anger dispersing, calmed himself, fixed his tie and straightened up. Then he noticed the cold, blue eyes burrowing into his own, before lowering his gaze. How did you find me? He asked in a very calm voice, his face looking down, and his hair covering his eyes. Believe it or not, you are quite well known in the eastern part of the continent, even though your name hasn't been revealed yet. You are known as the Emperor of the West, first person to not only united a majority of this unruly side of the continent, but to also create a grand empire which, even if the East united, would not be able to defeat. Hell, the daimyo of the East are in fact so scared of you that none of them dare try to challenge you, Jiraiya explained himself. You were also last seen moving to the west on the borders of Wind Country, and everyone here knows your name, so naturally it was easy to find out your location. Naruto looked up to his former sensei. I will admit your security is tough, it took me nearly forever to find a good reason for you to see me. At this Ishida glared at him. Well, it seems you managed to get by me, tell me what did you use? He asked in a polite, yet restrained tone. At this Jiraiya laughed nervously while scratching the back of his head. Well, I said I was on an errand of goodwill from the Fire Daimyo, as you can see I'm not. I apologize for the deception. Ishida glared at him a bit more before sighing. It seems since he is from the eastern side, he wouldn't understand what the respected way of asking an audience was. Naruto soon broke the silence. What are you doing here? And please, don't tell me it was to see my godson. That excuse if one you don't have the pleasure of using anymore. Again the Sannin flinched at the cold voice of his former student, but again it was to be expected. I came to explain myself why I did what I did. Naruto looked up, shock visible on his features. The old man sighed. I admit what I did was wrong, and I did something that you would never be able to forgive me, but I did it so I could finally clear my head. Every time I saw you, I saw your father and your mother, and it hurt deep inside to see you so alike to them both physically and mentally. When the time came when you retrieved Sasuke, I just couldn't bring myself to help you, because I did in fact blame you for Minato's death. When I heard you got banished, I realized I made a huge mistake. I decided to do the right thing before I left you. I gave you your heritage. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. It was Jiraiya who planted the scrolls in his apartment. The Sannin continued his story. Seeing you leave the village, I finally realized my mistake, but I didn't go to see you because I knew you would hate me, and what happened just now proved that. Naruto snorted at this. You guessed right on that one, old man. Unfazed, Jiraiya continued. I also knew that for what I did Minato and Kushina would never forgive me, so I decided to do the next best thing. I decided to help you out from the shadows. The council on many occasions tried to put you in the bingo book, and also tried to send hunter nins after you. But I went to the Lord of the Land of Fire, as he was a good friend to Minato for saving his daughter during the Third Shinobi War, and I told him the whole story. Naturally he felt in debt to Minato, and so he went to the council personally to end it. Trust me when I say it was quite a show. Flashback. The council of Konoha sat in the dark, grand chamber deep within the Hokage's mansion. Standing in front of them all was the daimyo of Fire Country, who was their lord and master. The look on his face showed his obvious discontent of both them, and the Hokage, who too was present. To the council something very serious must have transpired, for not only for the daimyo, the lord of Fire Country, to make his presence known, but also to have the features of deep dissatisfaction. Whatever the reason was, the council braced themselves for what was to come. A very reliable source told me that you are trying to put a boy in the bingo book, for the sole reason of being the vessel of the nine-tailed fox. I must ask this council if this is true. The council on their part were naturally shocked at what they were hearing. Hiashi was the first to regain his composure. My lord, he started, I am afraid that the reason for trying to put him in the bingo book is not that reason. While I do admit that it is a reason all on its own, it is not the main reason. The daimyo looked at him. Strange, he spoke, sounding confused, because I do believe that is the only reason, and only way you can put him into the bingo book. The council looked quite nervous at this. Firstly, your Hokage had banished the boy, so you cannot label him a missing ninja, as he isn't technically a ninja anymore. Secondly, you cannot have him placed as a criminal, because I can see no grounds in order to put him in as one. My third reason is in fact of political reasons. The council looked confused, so he decided to clarify. The daimyo of Wind in fact spoke about this Naruto with high regards, saying that he helped Suna's demon vessel, and also made him see his own fault in cutting their ninja's pay. Also, Princess Yukie of Spring Country also holds Naruto in high regards for what he did for her. So I do believe that if I was to allow you to put him in the book, then my own political influence with these two will begin to decrease, as well as those in the land of vegetables, and the land of birds. As you can see, I cannot allow this event to take place. The daimyo then stood up from his chair, the council was frozen, and they knew what was coming. I am ordering you, all of you, not to put Naruto Uzumaki in the bingo book for any reason. If I find that you have put him in, then the consequences will be extremely dire. The threat was hit home. Now the council knew they were powerless to try and get rid of Naruto. Homura tried to protest. But my lord, he yelled, he could easily join our enemies and tell them our secrets. Konoha is now in danger. The cold glare he received instantly shut him and whose fault is that, I wonder? The council flinched at their lord's words. The daimyo stood up from his chair, and proceeded to walk out of the chambers. Remember that my warning stands, as it will be you who will pay the price. After this the chambers were in silence. Flashback end. Naruto looked at his godfather with complete shock. Both he and the daimyo of Fire Country did all that for him. A small smile graced his lips. Jiraiya, why I cannot forgive you for you abandoning me. I do thank you for both giving me my heritage, and for saving me from the council. The Sannin smiled in delight. He had repaired a small bond in their broken relationship, and although it was small, it was a start. He also noted that the guards were now at ease, which to him was a relief. I guess I must thank the Lord of Fire Country as well for getting me out of the to be added to the bingo book list, he added as an afterthought. Then a look of horror quickly appeared of his face before turning to the old man. Does Konoha know about me yet? Naruto asked the dreaded question. He was deeply relieved when he saw the Sannin shook his head. As I said, they know about you exploits, but not you identity. Apparently you are visibly unknown in the East. Only known as the Emperor of the Western Empire. Naruto was happy to know his identity was still a mystery. He could only imagine the horrors if they found out. They would be willing to bring Konoha to its knees if it meant his demise. He then looked at the Sannin completely seriously. That's not the only reason for you coming here to see me, is it? The Sannin nodded his head. Naruto sighed. This was going to be a long day. Tsunade was desperately trying not to rub her temples at the bickering of this council. They were dragged into a war with Iwa, Oto and Kumo in a war, which was easy to see it would be near impossible to win. Several small countries had also joined in hoping to gain the spoils of Konoha. It was widely believed that Orochimaru managed to get the cages of lightning and stone to attack the village in the leaves, using their not-so-great past as leverage. Now it was a 3, if not more against 1 war, with Konoha looking to be the loser. And even if they did win, Konoha would find it incredibly hard to recover from the loss of lives and resources, which could take decades. Suna had retracted their alliance with Konoha shortly after they banished Naruto, and now they refused to give aid in the war, and the Princess of Spring also refused to lend a hand to the Leaf Village. Bird and vegetable countries also cut their ties with Konoha, and when Wave Country finally paid of the debt for what was meant to be an A-ranked mission, they closed their borders to Konoha. Mist was also unable to help due to the fact they were still recovering from the civil war they suffered from. Needless to say, the rebels won. Because the third Hokage didn't support them in any way, they didn't consider it necessary to aid Konoha. Now Konoha was alone, and they needed an ally if they were to win this war and get out well. At this moment that seemed impossible. But that wasn't the complete story, as it seemed that multiple daimyo of the foreign lands were converge of the land of fire, and take its recourses for itself. If this rumor was indeed true, then there was no way of winning this war. Orochimaru must have managed to enlist their support. Because of this, the Fire Daimyo was powerless to help them as this new coalition, called the Northern Alliance, was about to converge on the Land of Fire. This was a clever tactic on Orochimaru's behalf, as now the daimyo's lands were threatened, he was less inclined to send reinforcements to Konoha. They had been outmaneuvered time and again in this war. They had lost the political battle, now it seems they were going to lose more than that. Tsunade finally had enough of the loud noise that filled the chamber, the arguments that filled the air. She raised her fist high above her head, and then slammed it down onto the stone table, causing a crack to appear. The loud noise easily gathered the council's undivided attention to her. The council was made up of the main clans of Konoha, and the Hokages, personal advisors. Sasuke Uchiha was now a member of the council as well, but ever since his little betrayal to Orochimaru, he hasn't been completely trusted by any other of the members. Now does anyone have any reasonable solutions to this problem? We need an ally, a strong one if we are to win this war and survive in relatively good shape. Tsunade stated. Danzo nodded his head in agreement. While he disagreed many times with Tsunade in the past, now was not the time for divided government. The Hokage is right, if we are to get out of this mostly intact, then we need to get another force involved on our side if we are to turn the tide to our favor, credibly a force strong enough to turn the tide. Inochi shook his head at this, he like all the others knew that there was a major problem. But who will aid us? He asked. Suna tore up the alliance with us to shreds when we banished Naruto Uzumaki. Following that, Spring Country has become very cold to us, as well as Wave, Bird, and Vegetable countries, not counting the other smaller areas which the boy made an impact with. Furthermore, Mist has no reason to aid us, so they won't. Come to think of it, I do believe that banishing him was the worst mistake we have made since Konoha's founding. It had brought more harm than good to us in the long term. Sure, we no longer have to worry about the Kyuubi coming back to terrify us, but at what price? Hell, the Kyuubi even may appear again right before us if something happened to Naruto. Many members actually agreed with the Yamanaka on these last points, as soon after the boy's departure, foreign relations began to plummet fast to an all-time low. Even their own daimyo seemed to be on the boy's side, forbidding them to place him in the bingo book or try to send ninja after him. Jiraiya also seemed to be supporting the boy also, as soon after he left, the Sannin left too, never have they heard from him since. It seemed that the whole world was against the village for what they did to that one boy. I still say the third should have allowed me to make him into a weapon, that power would be greatly useful by now, Danzo stated. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Damn, she had been foolish in banishing Naruto. Being pressured by the council, as well as the anger by the villagers to how Naruto handled the retrieval of Sasuke, Tsunade's hands were tied. Part of her originally believed that if she banished Naruto, then waited a few years before recalling him, everything would have calmed down by then. Turned out not to be the case. In desperation, she resorted to informing all of them Naruto's burden, hoping the younger generations would have stood by him by understanding his burden. How wrong she was. No sooner had she told them all, they all turned on him. Now because of her mistakes, she not only lost her surrogate grandson, but also caused his former friends to hate him. She never felt so old in her life, causing the ultimate betrayal of trust. I have an idea, it's crazy and no, but it may be our only hope. How about trying to bring aid from the Empire in the West? Everyone turned to the one who spoke, it was Sasuke Uchiha. While people may not believe it, he regretted his actions and was even trying to become Hokage, in memory of the person who tried to help him, Naruto Uzumaki. Hope that one day he could see the blonde once more, and try to help him in any way he possible could. Koharu smiled at the suggestion. It became well known throughout the east part of the continent. A young boy within 5 years conquered the vast lands of the west, which were separated by the vast mountains that go between the two parts, and in fact became the first person ever to be able to unify a vast amount of the continent, and in a brilliant record time as well. While they knew little about its military strength in detail, they did know that its army was easily the largest in the continent, and had some powerful warriors in its ranks. This had to be the case due to the sheer size of the empire. Yes, getting the empire as an ally would easily turn the tables in the war, and may even cause both Kumo and Iwa to surrender without a fight, as the emperor could have contacts with the daimyos of lightning and stone, and if the rumors were true, get them not to attack Fire Country. So it only made sense to try and get the emperor as an ally. One problem still remains, spoke Shikaku Nara in his usual dull tone. How can we persuade the Emperor of the West to join in the war? They have no reason to. The Akamichi head nodded in agreement to his companion and friend. I must disagree with this idea. Everyone turned to Hiyashi. First of all, why do we actually have to give in return for our aid? Also, this is the West we are talking about. Do you honestly expect them to come to the rescue to an Eastern power, just because we ask them to? Furthermore, what do we know of the Emperor? For all we know, he could want Fire Country as a vessel in return for military aid. Many of the council began to look dejected at the last point. Becoming a vessel to another power would be humiliating. Tsunade sighed in annoyance. Well, it is worth a try. Regardless of the cost, we must seek aid. I for one am willing to serve a higher power if it means our survival. The Hokage spoke with authority. I will send a team of my choosing into the empire, and see if they can get an audience with the emperor, which should be easy as he does a lot of foreign and domestic affairs personally. Heishi looked to Tsunade with unfazed features. Does anyone know anything about this emperor of the West? Asked Shuza. Apparently the rumors which are circulating, he is open-minded and treats his guests with care, no matter who they are. And I also heard that their economy is starting to become one of the best as well, so it could be possible to also gain a trade agreement. Danzo replied. He sounds also to be an idealist. Being one myself, it's best to find out his motives as well. I would not rather have to worry about the West as well. Tsunade nodded her head to the old war hawk. It was reassuring to know that they were dealing with a powerful person. Well, I do believe that is all for today. Meeting dismissed. You are asking me to help Konoha. Naruto stared at the man in shock. He was asking for the impossible. Jiraiya knew he was pushing it, so he had to be careful how he moved, or it would end in a very bad way. I know what I am asking for you is a lot, Naruto, and I do understand that you want to protect your people, but war is going to come to you sooner or later, the Sannin explained. Naruto sighed in annoyance. Tell me, Jiraiya, why should I help a village that has scorned my very existence since the day I was born? He asked. The answer he got was simple. Because you are better than them, better than me. The man spoke in a calm and soft voice. You never once let your hatred rule your judgment. You never once left people alone when they were at their time of need. He then smiled. So show them you are better than them. Prove to them that you aren't what they think you are. Naruto began to rub his temples, looking to be deep in thought. Should he help Konoha? Would they accept him? Would they still hate him? Jiraiya hit home with his next sentence. What about Hinata? Do you still care about her? Naruto looked shocked at the name. Hinata. Hinata Hyuga, the girl who had confessed her love for him. But did she now see him as the demon fox? Or did she still feel something for him? But it's just not Konoha that's in peril, Naruto. The blonde looked up at him strangely. He saw the Sannin's face was one of seriousness. The whole of Fire Country is now in danger. His eyes widened at the news. How? He asked. Surely Orochimaru couldn't be that ambitious. Turns out that Orochimaru had enlisted the aid of the daimyos of Earth, Lightning, and several smaller countries to his aid. Also, he's gained the alliance of many other small countries, promising them all part of the lands of fire if they cooperate, and so now a grand army is moving against it. It now apparently being called the Northern Alliance. Naturally, the fire daimyo is in a state, and we both know that he won't survive against this many odds. To be honest, it is a clever tactical move. With the daimyo forced to protect his own lands, he won't be able to protect Konoha, thus leave Konoha with no aid whatsoever. I can understand why you would be deeply upset with Konoha, but even if you don't help them, at least help the people of Fire Country. I'm sure in this current situation, the daimyo would pay any price to survive. Naruto was now conflicted. He did owe the fire daimyo for sticking his neck out to stop Konoha coming after him, but then he would be involved in a war that technically didn't involve him. He gave a deep sigh of annoyance. I'll think about it. Jiraiya decided to leave it there. While he was not pleased with the decision on only thinking about it, he was happy that Naruto would consider the possibility. A loud knock on the door soon brought all in the room out of their thoughts. Come in, Naruto shouted, turning his gaze to the person who entered. He was a tall, slender man, who wore a bright red suit, with a white long-sleeve shirt. He had long flowing hair that reached down his back tied in a ponytail and had a face that women could just faint over. So it's true that you are here, he spoke, his voice warm and soft. He then turned to Naruto with a confused look on his features. I thought you said you would never deal with Konoha again after what they did to you. The blonde again gave yet another sigh. He seemed to be doing that a lot this morning. Well, something came up that I wasn't expecting, unfortunately, and now a grave situation is developing in the eastern pocket. The redhead looked at the Sannin then smirked. Well, I must say it's been 19 years since we last met, Jiraiya the Toad Sannin. Said Sannin looked at the man with a questioning glare. How did he know him? Who are you? He asked simply. The long-haired man extended his arm as he did a fanciful bow. Forgive me, where are my manners? I have gone by many names over my 10,000-year existence, dear Jiraiya. But you know me, old man, as the Kyuubi no Yoko. The nine-tailed demon fox. Jiraiya's face was the picture-perfect example of complete and utter horror, a face that Naruto couldn't help but burst out laughing at the sight of due to how ridiculous he looked. Tsunade sat in her office, fingers interlocked in front of her face, Shizune beside her. Standing before her was the assembled team in which she hoped would prove to be the salvation of Konoha. Kakashi Hatake, Kurenai Yuhi, Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, Sakura Haruno, and Hinata Hyuga. Many of the selected group was of the former Rookie 9, and she picked each one for a different reason. Kakashi Hatake was a skilled Jonin, with over 1,000 jutsu and the legendary Sharingan. He would be a formidable opponent to anyone they met, and a good group leader of this mission. Despite being of a lazy nature, his experience was vital. He was also sensei of the now deceased Team 7, and knew the boy, Naruto Uzumaki, quite well. She secretly hoped that if they did encounter Naruto along the way, even though it was a slim chance, he would be able to convince him to return. Kurenai Yuhi, the Genjutsu mistress, would prove a valuable support by confusing the enemy with her illusions. She also would be a good second in command, also due to her experience, and her outlook on life contrasted that of Kakashi's, giving the group different options on certain matters should they arise. She was also a last column of support for Hinata, so she was also valued for that reason since she too was coming on this mission. Kiba Inuzuka and his partner Akamaru were a deadly double team, and being the rank of Jonin also showed his skills. Should the group encounter any trouble, he would easily be able to pull them out. When she told everyone of Naruto's dark secret, he was one of the first to turn against the blonde. Now she wished she hadn't had done it, as if they even got Naruto back, he would receive a less than warm welcome. Shino Aburame was also a very skilled Jonin, having being good a reconnaissance made him needed should they run into trouble. His calm demeanor would be an added bonus to the group if situations heated up too much. Sakura Haruno, the best medic nin ever to be produced, even in Tsunade's prime she couldn't achieve what her apprentice had done. So it was only natural that she takes this mission. Like Kiba, she despised Naruto, not for being a demon, but as danger that needed to be eliminated. Again she wondered if it was a good idea to tell them his dark secret. Finally, Hinata Hyuga was put on the team for a very special reason. While she was only a chunin, her diplomatic skills were second to none. So if the emperor were to decide not to aid the village, then Hinata would do her very best to persuade him to reconsider. She was the only one out of the rookie 9 to miss Naruto, and finding out his secret only strengthened her love for the blonde. Love really is a special thing. The reason you are all here is because you all will be going to the Western lands, to go to the Western Empire and try and persuade the Emperor to aid us in this war. The assembled ninja were deeply surprised, they were going west. None of them had any knowledge of the lands, so this was a complete new adventure for them. You all have been entrusted with this mission because of your skills. You must do everything you can to make him join the war as our ally, or we will lose this war. The future of Konoha hangs in the balance, so you must not fail. Tsunade spoke with a very rare seriousness, which made all present understand the situation better. They were to try and get an empire into the war, or Konoha would surely fall. Naruto rattled his head furiously as he attempted to face his most difficult challenge to date. He sat in his private study within the palace so he could deal with this problem in peace, his guards outside to make sure he was not disturbed. No daimyo, demon or any other situation in the past was as annoying as this, yet he refused to back down. It was the bane of all rulers and it would continue to be so for the next 1,000 years until a proper solution was found, and could now understand what frustrated old man Sarutobi the most in life. Paperwork, lots of it. Yes, ruling a big empire had its drawbacks, especially when Naruto preferred to check a lot of important things himself. His inability to delegate important matters to others came at the price of having a bigger load than one would expect. Within the pages contained reports of various matters, from cabinet briefings, meeting requests and regional industrial reports, to economic reports, various military affairs and even research into new subjects. Some were daily, some weekly, others were monthly, and on the obviously rare occasion, yearly reports were given to him. Naruto sighed in annoyance. Often he wished he could trust people more, but betrayal after betrayal in his early youth left him disillusioned. Thank Kami he had been able to trust Lord Kome Ishida as his chief of staff, this really took a lot of the workload of him. With Kome dealing with the bureaucrats around the regions and the capital, and was able to decide which matters required his personal attention. He shuddered at the prospect of also having to do his workload as well. He stalled his pen. Was he becoming paranoid? He did use the Hattori ninja clan as his personal assassins. Thanks to Hanzo they all swore loyalty to him, and in the West they take loyalty very seriously, more so than in the East. While he didn't have to assassinate anyone yet, he felt if any trouble occurred, whether internally or externally, he had a force that could deal with the problem. The Hattori clan were the traditional ninja, and showed Naruto how much the Eastern shinobi had now lost the original meaning of what it was to be one. They were killers, plain and simple. They never used fancy jutsu or weapons, just dark clothes and simple tools to carry out their assignments. Thinking about it, it was scary to think that even the most powerful of warriors was as vulnerable as a child when asleep. And how well the Hattori clan carried out their assignments only made him more thankful for their loyalty. He also created his own secret police, the Ihei, the Sentinels. These men, under Lord Kazuma, were essentially his eyes and ears around the empire, finding out plots and events that if left unchecked, could hold major problems in the future. Using ancient techniques only known to their group, they were able to bend time and space to essentially go invisible, become invulnerable to damage, and even teleport over long distances. He met this force shortly before becoming emperor. They were looking to put their abilities to the use of someone worthy of them. The agreement between them was simple. They would serve him loyally, if he would not try to find out the secrets of their techniques. Naruto didn't see the problem in this. After all, everyone had secrets that they guarded jealously, and accepted the terms. He hasn't regretted it since. His mind wandered back to the east. Ever since Jiraiya informed him of the situation, he began to wonder if he should do something. Of course, there was no reason for the empire to go to war, as they never had any relations in the east at all. At the same time, the Fall Fire country could easily disrupt the balance of power between the shinobi forces. What if they decide to Suna of Mist next? Kyuubi taught him that the best way to keep your enemies under control is to have them fight amongst themselves, weakening each other in the process. If Fire Country and Konoha were to fall, what was to say this new alliance would be bold enough to actually challenge the empire? Perhaps for this it could be a good reason to aid Fire Country, just so they could keep tearing at each other's throats and not bother with the empire. They would have good reason to, and they found out his identity. Iwa would want to have his head solely for being the son of the Yellow Flash, Minato Namikaze. Also, Orochimaru wouldn't have forgotten about their past bouts, and so would most probably want to strike first at him before he could do the same. Come to think of it, he also had a score to settle against Orochimaru. He was the one who essentially caused his grief of being banished by going for Sasuke, but also caused the death of the third Hokage, the only person Naruto truly trusted. But that was a personal vendetta, just like Konoha's. He wouldn't bring the empire into war so soon after its founding. Several knocks on the brought Naruto out of his thoughts. Turning to see who was coming in, he saw Lord Kome standing tall at the door. Your Imperial Majesty, the cabinet meeting will be starting in a few minutes. Kami. He was so wound up in his thoughts, he forgot about the cabinet meeting today. He would have to finish the paperwork later. He had other things on his mind at the moment. Thank you, Kome, he replied as he stood up from his desk. After the meeting, could you call Lord Kazuma to my office? I need to speak with him on a matter referring to the situation in the east. Lord Kome knew which matter he was talking about, as he was there when Jiraiya made his appearance. Are you seriously thinking on getting involved? He wasn't jumping to conclusions, but by needing Kazuma meant he needed information, and that was usually not in the good sense. Naruto shook his head. Still thinking about it, he muttered, however, I do need to know what their plans are after they deal with Konoha and Fire Country. Okay, so he was being paranoid, but he was not going to let his hard work be ruined by the Eastern Shinobi, no way in hell. It's been several days since they departed from Konoha. The squad sent by Tsunade were, at this moment, traveling through Bird Country, crossing through the neutral countries to get to their destination, the Western Empire. It was a delightful feeling to know that not all the lesser countries had not joined the war as enemies. Konoha got quite hopeful when they saw that they didn't join the Northern Alliance. When they sent delegates, however, they too were turned down for aid. They simply wanted nothing to do with the war. Many in the squad, mainly Sakura and Hinata, were wondering what type of person the Emperor is. They all heard rumors of him being the same age as them, and rumors on his rise to power, but they wanted to see this Emperor for themselves. This left them to wonder if he was an arrogant man, or was he an idealist. Very few words had actually been spoken since they left Konoha, as all were pondering on the mission at hand. They felt a heavy burden on their shoulders. If they didn't gain the Emperor's aid, Konoha would surely fall. Everyone in the squad knew of Naruto's secret of being the vessel of Kyuubi, thanks to Tsunade, in a naive attempt to calm down the situation, informed them all of his burden. Most of their reactions were not good ones. Kiba saw Naruto as the Kyuubi incarnate, adopting the view of his mother, Tsume, who hated Naruto for far deeper reasons as well. Tsume was a good friend to Kushina, and blamed Naruto for her death. She never accepted him as her son, only claiming that he was now possessed by the demon. Needless to say, Kiba would kill Naruto if he ever saw him again, feeling deceived by the blonde. Sakura saw Naruto as a threat that needed to be eliminated for the safety of the world. When Naruto brought back Sasuke in his beaten state, Sakura believed it was unnecessary force needed to bring him back. Needlessly to say, little friendship she had with him, especially using that accursed power. Now, while she didn't see him as the Kyuubi himself, she saw him as an unstable threat that needed to be eliminated. Shino's view was unknown, but most reckoned he didn't trust the blonde anymore. Then again, he never got to know him. His bugs always seemed to warn him about Naruto when he was close by. Now he knew the reason for this uneasy feeling. While he had nothing against Naruto, his orders on the banishment were clear. If he ever returned, he was to be eliminated. Hinata, however, still loved Naruto. She secretly held the belief that he would return for Konoha for her. But now she was to be put in an arranged marriage with the son of a noble, increasing the clan's prestige. Even now they saw her as a weakling, and they showed it by making Hanabi heir to the clan. But that wasn't the blow that made her now hate her own family. Now she had to rely on Kurenai for support, for even her friends showed none. After a few hours of silence, Kiba decided to break the silence. So Hinata looked at Kiba. When this mission is over, do you want to go on a date? He asked, more like pleaded with Hinata. She shook her head. Sorry Kiba, but no thanks. At this Kiba looked very angry. He knew the reason for this. Why do you still hold feels for Naruto? He yelled in anger, causing Hinata to flinch at the tone. I don't understand you, Hinata. He is the Kyuubi for Kami's sake. Why do you hold feelings for that demon? Kiba, stop it. Kurenai spoke with a bitter voice. She couldn't believe that Kiba could be so blind. Kiba luckily settled down, but still looked quite irritated. But Sakura started up next, trying to make Hinata see reason. You need to let go of the past, Hinata, Sakura said in a smooth and gentle tone. He won't come back to Konoha, he's not welcome there anymore. Hinata suddenly got bold and looked at both Sakura and Kiba in fury. The only reason he is no longer welcome is because you all betrayed him, some friends you all are. At that everyone visibly flinched at what she said. She was right, they did what Kakashi said was worse than trash, they abandoned a comrade. Before Kiba could retort, Kakashi jumped in. Settle down all of you, he agreed with Hinata a lot, and soon after Naruto left the village he realized his own mistakes. The main one was that he left Naruto alone in his time of need, just like everyone else. Only Hinata now had the right to call him a friend, because they were not for what they did. He hoped that he could see Naruto again and apologize for his actions, but the chances of that was slim to none. They all stopped talking when they reached what would be the border, which divided both east and west. This would be the first time that Konoha Nin had traveled to the western side of the continent, and it was for a mission of great importance. Right, I do believe this cabinet meeting is now in session, asked Naruto as he sat down in his chair at the head of a large, rectangular table. Around this table were some of the most important men and women in the empire. Of course you had the emperor, at his right was his chief of staff. To his left was the chancellor, who ministered the empire's finances. Down the table were the ministers of the various departments set up to minister the areas of their selected fields. These ranged from agriculture, to research and development, to culture and education. Also in the group were the representatives of the three houses. Behind him were Kyuubi, and the members of Naruto's advisory council, 5 members wearing purple robes and headwear who helped to give the emperor a range of opinions when he asked for it. Flanking the room was the Praetorian Guard, all 12 of them. Some of the more notable members of the cabinet included the Minister of Defense, Old Man Yoshimoto Niseki, who was essentially the head of the army after the emperor himself. Dubbed the Old War Hawk, Naruto found his style very similar to that of Danzo back in Konoha. While he always believed that might was right, he was loyal to his cause. In many cases he looked like him. He had an eye bandaged over and his left arm is missing. This ideology, compared to Naruto's negotiation first strategy, often came to disagreements, especially when dealing the Siren Kingdom. But it is when war is the agenda for both that he considers him a valuable ally. He was a natural leader of men in times of war, and was an innovative general who liked to use new technologies to his advantage over his enemies. When Naruto and Yoshimoto faced each other for the first time, Naruto was close to suffering a catastrophic defeat. It was only thanks to Kyuubi that he managed to gain a small victory over the old man. Time and again they fought, until, at the end of Naruto's crusade, Yoshimoto swore loyalty to him, impressed at the boy's fighting spirit. Needless to say, he has been one of Naruto's strongest supporters, despite their differences. Another notable minister is the Justice Minister Kazuki Chosakabe. Being a common-born young man, he was brought into his position by his great understanding of law. Most of this knowledge came from the fact that he was completely a self-taught man. While because he was of common birth, the nobles looked down on him, they dare not speak out against him due to his position. Naruto was impressed of Chosakabe's track record when nominated by several influential people who had relied on his services beforehand. He had an influential role in writing the new constitution for the empire, which granted Naruto his autocratic powers, and was the one who interpreted the law on the emperor's behalf. He wore formal attire similar to that of a daimyo, wearing a loose gray coat with long sleeves and wearing a cone-shaped black headwear. Finally, there was the minister of the established religions, whose name is Kato Kiyomasa. He was a cheery old monk with a bald head from the southern provinces, and during the wars before Naruto appeared, he spent most of his time trying to help the people in his province. Due to his kind nature, he was very popular, so popular that the warlords dared not try to remove him in case of a severe backlash. When Naruto appeared in the area, he discovered this monk at work, helping those less fortunate. Both he and Naruto quickly got on due to their visions of peace. When the blonde became emperor after finally unifying the lands, he found that there was much religious discrimination happening all over the empire. This was due both to the rising popularity of Buddhism and the religion of Christianity brought by trade. In response, he appointed Kato Kiyomasa as the appropriate minister, thanks to his light-hearted nature, to help sort out the religious tensions within the empire. As such, for one of his religion, he wore the orange robes of Buddhism, but also wore over them another long-sleeved robe that had a red sash wrapped around his waist. Right then, what is the first order of business? Asked the young emperor, interlocking his fingers as he placed them on the table before him and setting the start of the cabinet meeting. Your Imperial Majesty, the Chancellor began, the first order of business is the economic stability of the southern provinces. In the southern region of the empire, he handed the teen emperor a piece of paper containing the details of the situation from his file. Naruto sighed in irritation as he looked at the report. It was the southern region that suffered the worst in the war. What brought it down to near poverty was by the act of the despotic daimyo, which had a firm grip over most of the region. When he saw he was losing the war, he ordered his men to impose scorched earth on the land. Farms, woodland, homes, buildings and livestock were all but destroyed. While Naruto won against his soon after, the damage was done, and it was at the expense of the population that Naruto gained his victory. Knowing it was primarily his fault for the situation they now endured, he aimed to restore the land to its original beauty. Furthermore, restoring the southern lands, which was primarily open plan, could mean that large farms could be built to benefit the whole empire. The poor souls, It seems that the evil that plagued them for so long still bears its curse upon them. Kato spoke in a calm, yet wise tone. He personally did not blame Naruto for what happened in the south. He knew that eventually the daimyo would cause great misery even if Naruto didn't appear. Upon seeing what the tyrant did firsthand, he knew that after the southern province was finally restored, the people would flourish under the empire. It is a serious situation still, I'm afraid, the chancellor continued while shuffling the papers in front of him. While the other regions, particularly the west and east, are seeing a significant increase in trade, commerce, and agricultural expansion, the provinces that make up the southern region have made only diminutive gains. The Minister of Commerce stated his piece. Indeed, commerce has had a significant boost in the central, western and eastern regions of the empire. People are now starting to become affluent enough to start their own businesses. Trade guilds have been working with the commerce in the west, making that region even more prosperous than before. Agricultural goods have also seen an increase in all the other regions. Many farmers now have enough spare produce to be able to sell far more on the markets. Furthermore, the new tools developed by the research guilds, such as using water power with watermills for the irrigation the land to help with the regrowth of crops, also with other tools invented, would easily bring a greater amount of crops for the future, the Minister of Agriculture put in. As such, people are not feeling the strain of food supplies like it was when this empire was first founded. It is clear that more investment is going to be needed in order to attempt to re-establish the southern region to its former state. The rural landscape, if restored, could provide us with the agricultural farms needed to put the final strain of food supplies to rest. Also, we would have enough room to be able to construct any other vital storages needed for the empire. While it proves to be an annoyance now, I know that bringing back the southern provinces will be a benefit to the whole of this empire. As with the new inventions for agriculture, the amount produced would be astronomical, Naruto concluded. Many of the ministers nodded their heads in agreement. Like the northern province, it was proving to be a pain. But in the long term, it would provide essential materials to bring the empire to splendor. However, the chancellor looked quite uncomfortable at the young emperor's conclusion. That's the problem, Your Imperial Majesty. Naruto turned to give him a questioning look. If we are to give any more investment to the southern region, due to our current economic state, it would mean that we would have to cut the investment of the other regions. We are at the limits to our current budget capacity with our reconstruction program for the provinces in question. Naruto sighed again, this time in annoyance. If he was to cut the budget to the other areas, it could stunt the growth. On the other hand, the current budget for the southern province was not doing enough, and at that rate, it could drain much needed resources to the empire. He could hear the advisors behind him giving him the pros and cons of both decisions. He had to come to a decision. Very well, have the budget and investment for the other regions cut to help support the supplies needed to restore the southern provinces. Also, have the program looked at to see if any alterations can be done to improve what we can get out of the budget. I want more emphasis on buildings and agriculture. Let's see if we can restore the infrastructure first and foremost. Very well, Your Imperial Majesty, the Chancellor gave in, reshuffling his papers once more. At this, Kyuubi smiled. It seems Naruto learned a lot about taking risks. He could understand his determination to bring back the southern lands, as he felt it was his fault they were in their current state. What he hoped was that they didn't let that one goal overshadow all the others. Be careful, Naruto, that your determination does not become an obsession. Naruto, Kyuubi spoke in a hushed tone so only Naruto could hear. The teenage emperor nodded in recognition of his friend's worry. He was determined to get the southern lands back on course, but he would always make sure to see the bigger picture. Are you sure this is wise, Your Imperial Majesty? Asked one of his advisors. I am looking at the long term. The southern provinces would reap great rewards if it able to flourish like the others, was his reply. Right. Any other business? He asked. opening the floor to the cabinet. Your Imperial Majesty, the Emperor turned to the Minister of Research and Development. He was working in close relations to the research guilds that were located within the central region of the empire. We have discovered a new invention, brought forward by the guilds interested in protecting the empire, which could prove useful in the future. He handed the boy the paper, which showed the invention and the details of what it was. Then the minister reached down next to his chair and brought up a jar with what looked to be a black powder, onto the table. The members of the cabinet all began to eye the object with interest. They call this gunpowder, and it has quite a range of uses. When ignited, it spontaneously combusts. As shown on the paper, if used within a tube and one end is sealed, it can hurl projectiles, depending on the size of the tube and projectile over distances far superior than that used with a torsion in a bow. At this the cabinet began to buzz at this information. The old war hawk smiled at the prospect of this new weapon. Even the Kyuubi raised an eyebrow at this. That's not all, it can also be used as an explosive device. If packed into a tight, hollow sphere, it can be thrown as an explosive device, the outburst of energy causing the shards of the sphere as shrapnel. Also, if you add metal pellets to the equation within the sphere, then you have something, which can take out large groups of infantry. Furthermore, if enough of this powder was massed, the power behind it would be greater than that of an explosive tag. At hearing this, several ministers looked unnerved at the prospect of something more powerful than what was used for the past 3 centuries. However, Yoshimoto was close to foaming at the mouth, for now he had a new invention that would carve a path through the empire's enemies. Well then, may I ask when the armed forces received the formula to create this powder? Asked the Minister of Defense. Whenever His Imperial Majesty says it time, was the Minister of Research's reply. All eyes turned to the young emperor. Naruto was wary of allowing the old war hawk a new weapon due to his radical nature. Being a man who believed might was right, that the end justified the means, the teenage emperor had to keep him on a leash, so to speak, to keep him in line. However, this new invention would be incredibly valuable, and he had to admit Yoshimoto would use it to full effect. He noticed Komei lean towards him. We should not pass up such an opportune weapon that would give us an advantage such as this, Your Majesty. Turning his eyes to his old comrade, he saw Kyuubi nod his head. I agree with Your Imperial Majesty, this would prove advantage against our enemies. I suggest we trust Lord Yoshimoto with this new weapon, Naruto's advisory council informed him. After a few more seconds of pondering, he came to a decision. Very well, Lord Yoshimoto, I'm entrusting this new powder to use it to the best of your military knowledge. I know that out of all of use, you would know how best to use this new invention for the benefit of the empire. The old man bowed his head to Naruto's decision. He was pleased that he was trusted enough to use this potentially dangerous powder. He was well aware how little Naruto trusted him due to their past, and especially some of the decisions he had made. Even after seeing the benefits of joining Naruto, and was rewarded with a position within the cabinet for his vast military skills, he still came into conflict with the emperor on several occasions. Idealistic men usually do. Right, what else is there for this meeting? Naruto once again asked. Your Imperial Majesty, Naruto turned to the Minister of Culture. I take it there is still serious tensions with the Siren Kingdom to the north. Naruto, however, immediately knew what he was going to say. I know what you are going to say. You are not the first to bring this proposal to me, but the answer is still no. The minister looked downcast of the proposal being dropped. He, however, knew not to push an agenda when His Majesty made his mind up beforehand. Your Imperial Majesty, have you decided yet what action is to be taken with the East? Komei asked, seeing this important. Naruto sighed at this. He was still in conflict on what to do. Your Imperial Majesty, one of his advisors began, if this Northern Alliance was indeed to defeat Hai no Kuni, then the balance of power would shift dramatically. I don't think I need to inform your Imperial Majesty of what could be the consequences of this. Indeed, the balance of power in the East was what could directly affect the safety of the Western Empire. Chosokabe began. If Fire Country and Konoha were destroyed, then the Northern Alliance, led by this Orochimaru, would be the only dominant force in the East. This must be dealt with in some way as the Empire could be in peril. With that in mind, Naruto remembered what Jiraiya said to him when he told him of the situation. Because you are better than them, better than me. You never once let your hatred rule your judgment. You never once left people alone when they were at their time of need. So show them you are better than them. Prove to them that you aren't what they think you are. Jiraiya soon left after his small confrontation with Kyuubi, hoping to find more info in his spy network. He was not convinced, however, of the Sanin's intentions, so he ordered one of Kazuma's sentinels to keep an eye on him. Indeed, Kyuubi's voice brought Naruto out of his musings. While we won't gain anything of material value from help the Land of Fire, it would certainly keep the balance of power in line. As I have said before, the best way to weaken an enemy is with another in a power struggle. This time, however, Kome interjected. I should not have to remind His Imperial Majesty of the state of our army at this moment in time, however. Most of what actual force that is properly is in the northern region keeping the raids at bay. The rest of our army won't be ready till the next few months. At this Yoshimoto replied. It is not you have, it is how you use it. As our force currently stands, we have 3 legions of the Empire standing. All these have the unit strength of 100,000 men each. 2 of these legions are in the northern region, as you said, Lord Kome, but surely 1 legion would be enough for this. No, it won't, Lord Yoshimoto. At this, everyone turned to the speaker who just joined the group. It was a man clad completely in a black robe complete with hood, but also a high-collar black cape as well. Hey Lord Kazuma, the young emperor spoke gently. The figure turned and bowed to him. Your Imperial Majesty, I had a feeling you would have wanted to find out our potential enemy strength, so I sent my sentinels to find out what we could be up against. He then turned to address the cabinet. The ninja of the eastern villages are all versatile in their fields. Numbers won't mean much if your opponent can negate this. The ninja of the east are a cross of tradition ninja and samurai. From reports I have received, both Iwa and Kumo have army strength of 1,000 well-trained ninja each. This number is increased when you take into account the ninjas from the Sound Village, which is roughly 600. This is increased further by the rogue ninja he managed to employ. This ninja force when combined is about 3,000 in total. The daimyos of those countries also have armies of their own, which are at least double the numbers of ninja of their respected ninja villages. Kumo's daimyo is a military man, and thus out of all the rulers in the east, has the largest army. A force of roughly 5,000 men, but this is due to the conscription policy he uses. So while it's large, many of the men are untrained. Iwa on the other hand has a force of 2,000 men, but these men are properly equipped and are given a great deal of training. These soldiers are the most dangerous out of the members of the Northern Alliance. If you include the smaller villages also allied to this alliance, with a varying amounts of men at their disposal, then the numbers are approximately 13,000 men on the side of the Northern Alliance. At this, a minister jumped up from his seat. What? 13,000? Kazuma nodded. When are the next legions due to be ready? Asked another cabinet minister. 2 imperial legions will be ready in about 2 to 3 months, and after that another 3 more will be ready in about 6 months' time. Yoshimoto informed them. Naruto decided to end it here. We shall wait until something critical happens. If we are lucky, the eastern countries will stay in this standoff long enough for the other legions to get ready. Lord Yoshimoto, I want the 3rd Imperial Legion in reserve relocated to the eastern region. If we have to get involved, I would prefer to be ready. At this, Yoshimoto bowed his head. Right then, is there anything else? He asked once more. This time no one said anything. Then I do believe that is the end of our meeting, Naruto finished, and with that, the members of the cabinet began to disperse. As they walked out, they bowed their heads to Naruto in respect to their emperor. Your Imperial Majesty, as Naruto sat up from his chair, he turned to see who was calling him. It was Yoshimoto. I didn't want to bring this up in the meeting as it essentially strictly military business. We have a few new weapon designs that have been put to the test. I was wondering if Your Majesty was willing to see these new weapons in action later on this week. Naruto gave a small smile. With pleasure, Lord Yoshimoto. With our current situation, we are going to need all the technological advantage we can get over our enemies. I would love to see these new weapons in action. At this, Yoshimoto bowed his head in thanks, before leaving to join the other ministers in their respected fields of work. The people left with Naruto was Kome, Kyuubi, Kazuma, the Praetorian Guard and his advisors. It seems that we may get involved after all then, Your Imperial Majesty, Kome noted, seeing the way the events were turning. Your Imperial Majesty, one of the advisors quipped, would it be best to inform the countries between us and the eastern countries of us possibly moving through them? If we don't, it could prove to hinder us diplomatically in the future. Naruto shook his head at this. No, I would like for this to as quiet as possible. The countries west of Earth have joined the alliance, and so are effectively right on our borders. If Orochimaru got wind of our troop movements through those countries, he would get suspicious. For now, I would prefer to keep these troop movements strictly confidential. Lord Kazuma, have your sentinels keep a close eye on the Northern Alliance. If they so much as relocate their forces, I want to know. Kazuma bowed his head to His Majesty's orders, before disappearing in a puff of black smoke. Kyuubi gave a sigh. To think all this commotion because of what that old Sanin told you, then again it was beautiful to see his expression once he saw me. At this, Naruto gave a chuckle at the memory. Flashback. Jiraiya stood in complete fear as he gazed upon the nine tails in human form. This was the Kyuubi. Looking to the right, he could see Naruto was almost on the floor laughing, having to use the table to support himself. Behind him, the two men who were with him, later found to be Kome and Mitsuhide, gave smiles of amusement at the old man's predicament. They must really find his fear quite amusing as just to stand and watch him. Finally he managed to regain his voice to ask the question. Why, you're the Kyuubi? He asked with a shaken voice. For a second he felt a violent and horrific killing intent, which forced him to his knees, a killing intent that could only have come from the demon lord himself. Said demon was smiling at him. I hope that answers your question. He turned to Naruto. You okay there, Naruto? He asked with an amused expression. Naruto finally stopped laughing, and managed to stand up straight, regaining his composure. I'm fine, Kyuubi, he replied, humor dancing in his voice. He turned to his godfather, who looked close of having a heart attack. Here was the demon that nearly destroyed Konoha 19 years ago, and Naruto was standing next to him like he was an ordinary man. Naruto, you do know he is the Kyuubi? He asked, trying to understand what was going on. Naruto smiling and nodded his head. How did he get out? I thought that the seal was near unbreakable. Naruto's smile only widened at the statement Jiraiya made. Well, I broke it, he said. Turning to Kyuubi he spoke again. Kyuubi, unlike popular belief, isn't the bloodthirsty monster that everyone portrays him as. He then turned to Jiraiya. He was the one who helped me unify this country. The Toad Sage finally calmed himself down. I hope you know what you're doing, Naruto, he spoke with a serious tone. I will trust your judgment. But unlike you, I have bad memories with him. The Kyuubi signed, getting the Sanin's attention. You know, if I had a choice in the matter, I would never have attacked Konoha in the first place. Jiraiya raised a brow. I was under the control of a very old Uchiha, who made me attack the village because of his own hatred for it. So I am not to fully blame for the attack, for I was merely the weapon used by the Uchiha. Jiraiya understood what he meant, for the kunai isn't to blame for the killing, but the person wielding it. Flashback end. Naruto was quite surprised that the two would get along so well. He believed that Jiraiya would have tried to fight the demon, but soon realized that would be stupid on his part. He sighed. Still, in some ways Konoha was his old home, even though it really didn't act like one. But then again he felt he was really doing this for the Empire's benefit of not getting drawn into a long-term war. Using Hai no Kuni as the land to face on would be much better than having to fight on the Empire's own soil. And there was Hinata. She would surely die if Konoha fell. He admitted that he still held deep feelings for her, but how did she feel about him? He remembered the late Sarutobi's speech about the will of fire, and in many ways he had to thank the old man for being the family he never had, the grandfather that always looked after him. In fact, if he were still alive he would have gone and supported Konoha straight away, because he was one of the few who treated him like a human, again like Hinata. He was brought out of his thoughts when heard a knock on the cabinet door. Turning, he could see Mitsuhide walking in and bowing to him waiting at the door. "Pardon me, Your Imperial Majesty, but there is a lady waiting to see you in the guest lounge," he spoke. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Who could it be? Did she say who her name was? The head servant looked deep in thought as he tried to remember her name. Upon seeing so many guests all the time it was hard to remember all their names. Then it suddenly came to him. Ah yes, now I remember. She said her name was Yukie Fujikaze. At this Naruto smiled. One of the few people outside the Empire he could say truly was a close friend. He turned to the rest of the group that he was with. "I will leave you now to your duties, as I have a lady to see too." At this Kome and his advisors gave bows before they left, while Kyuubi just gave him a grin, before attending to his own business. The Emperor then left to the guest lounge, his bodyguards in tow. The team from Konoha stood in awe as they appeared in front of the gates to a large city in the Empire. The walls stood tall, towering over them as they saw how high they were. They could see soldiers on the battlements, patrolling the city perimeters. It was ironic that it would be the first thing they found when they crossed the border to the west. Kakashi turned to the others. "Okay, take off your headbands and take out your false identity cards. We must not tell them we are from Konoha, or they could get the wrong idea." The other nodded, understanding the situation, and did as they were told. Kakashi even took off his face mask, which came to a shock at the others. Finally they saw his face. He turned to them. "What?" he asked. The others just shook it off, while put a simple headband on to cover his Sharingan eye. After getting ready, they started to walk down to the main gate. Upon arriving they were stopped by a group of guards standing on duty. The team's surprise, they were samurai, and well trained at the stances they took. This easily showed them that in this part of the continent, being a samurai was highly common, unlike in the East where they were merely private retainers. "Halt! State your business here." The guard who spoke was easily seen as a veteran due to his age. The others looked only to be in their late 20s and 30s, as such the old one must have been the leader. Kakashi took the lead. "Hello there. We're a group of tourists from the East," the Jonin replied. "We came to see the Empire sights, as they were told to be quite exquisite." At this the guard merely laughed. "Well, I have to say we get a lot of tourists in the Empire ever since it was officially founded. Ever since the war ended, things have been a lot more quiet than they were before the Emperor liberated us from the chaos," he explained. "If I had to recommend a site, I would say you would want to go down to the Jishang province in the northwest, and visit the Dragon Temple. If you're lucky, you may get to see a real, live dragon." At this the Konoha nin looked shocked. "A real dragon?" The guard laughed again as he saw the looks of disbelief on their faces. "Yes, a real dragon. That's why it has been titled, the Land of Dragons, because of that reason. Near its location is Dragon's Peak, where they reside. It is said, That he who controls the temple, controls the dragons. Well, if it is true, then the emperor has some mighty allies under his command. Sakura saw the perfect chance to ask some questions about the emperor. Speaking of the emperor, what is he like? She asked, trying making herself sound as excited as possible. I have to say he is by far the best ruler ever to come across the western continent. We are truly blessed by Kami, the guard started. He loves his people dearly, and tries not to resort to force, only seeing it as a last resort. He is truly a charismatic individual. In fact, half of the wars he fought were in fact with words, and not swords. Either way, he won them all. But he is not the type of person you want to cross if you anger him, which would be a feat all on its own, because if you do, then his vengeance is swift. Luckily, that rarely happens. He is only 19 years old, and yet he manages to rule the empire with great wisdom. Mind you, I think his companion has something to do with that. Kiba raised a brow. Companion? He asked, intrigued that there may in fact be a hidden power behind the throne. Yes, when His Imperial Majesty first appeared, he was accompanied by this strange character in red, a very mysterious person. He looked human, but I could swear on my life that he wasn't what he viewed himself to be. I can remember watching him fight during the wars. He would take countless warriors on single-handedly, and would dispatch them all with ease. I tell you, no, he is a force to be reckoned with, and not one to have as an enemy. But the emperor seems to trust him a lot, being one of his personal advisors and all. Will we be able to see him? Hinata spoke, trying her best not to stutter. Well, he does hold public speeches once a month, talking about the current events that are usually important. In fact, the speech that was on some days ago was the speech of the anniversary of the empire's unification. I have to stress he is a very good public speaker, able to capture the crowd's attention with just his words. But if want to try and see him on a one-to-one, I think that won't happen. Kakashi frowned slightly. It would be difficult to get an audience with the emperor if this was the case. Do you know where we can get a map of the empire, so we know where we are going? At this, a younger guard reached into his pocket, and pulled out a folded map, which he gave to Kakashi. He thanked him for the item. Now, before I can let you in, can we see some ID? The team pulled out their fake ID cards and showed them to the guards. Security's tight, Kiba commented, before being silenced by a glare from Kurenai. The old man sighed. Yes, it has to be, he said, gathering their attention. With that war that's going on in the east, there is a fear that it could spill into the west. The emperor really doesn't want to get involved in this war for some reason. Maybe it's because he wants to protect his people from a war that is not ours to fight. Then again, it could easily spill over to this side of the continent. Suddenly, for the team, it felt that getting the emperor to join forces with Konoha had just gotten a lot harder. Finally, the gates opened, and they were led into the city. But with all this happening, one of them noticed that not far from their current position, they were being watched by a black-robed, hooded figure, who had in fact watched them since they crossed the border into the empire. Well, it seems you have been busy in your court by the sounds of this, Naruto quipped as he listened to what had been going on in Spring Country. Yukie, also known as Koyuki Kazuhana, merely laughed in response. They can be bothersome at times. Being a daimyo is not easy, I have to say, with all the work that comes with it, she replied before finishing her red wine. How do you cope with it? Essentially, I just get it over with. Then again, I don't delegate much, so I make near enough all the decisions. Call me paranoid, it's just I don't want things to go wrong in someone else's hands. How do you get so much time if you work so much? Ah, I get it, you simply put it off. A ruler shouldn't do that, she scolded playfully, waging her finger at the same time. Naruto merely smiled at Yukie as he poured her another drink of red wine. After the mission to Spring Country, the two had remained good friends. Yukie went as far as to cut all ties with Konoha when Naruto got banished, causing a huge blow for the village. When she found out Naruto became the Western Emperor, in which she was the first to find out his identity, she visited him regularly when she had some free time of being the daimyo. She was one of the few people outside the empire he could fully trust with his feelings, and had his complete trust. You know, I still cannot believe you want to star in Jiraiya's Ika Ika movie. At this Yukie laughed. Well, I thought it would be an interesting experience. Naruto smiled as he took a sip of his wine. You don't know how much of an experience you are going to get, Yukie-chan. She blushed at the comment made by the blonde. Naruto's smile only got bigger as he saw the look on her face. A knock on the door unexpectedly interrupted the two. Naruto turned his head to the door. Come in, he shouted, and with a silent creak the door opened, revealing Kazuma walking through the door. Naruto's face suddenly turned serious. What is it, Lord Kazuma? He asked. The figure looked to do a sign as he explained what he had found. Your Majesty, one of my sentinels discovered a group of Konoha ninja posing as tourists that have just entered the city of Hyogo in the Kinki province, eastern region. At this, Yukie gasped as she put a hand to her mouth. Naruto's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. Show me, he ordered, his voice barely able to contain his fury. The leader of the sentinels extended his hand, and a large, blue sphere appeared in front of him. In the sphere it showed the faces of the group who entered his lands uninvited. Naruto instantly knew who they were, and his anger increased tenfold. How dare they just walk into his realm like this uninvited? Especially them. Bring them here, I want to ask them personally what the hell they are doing here in my lands. The team from Konoha tried very hard to navigate through the busy streets. Thanks to the map the guard gave them, they would be able to find a hotel in which they could stay for the night, as well as tourist information to get another map so they can travel to the capital, and try to seek an audience with the emperor. As they walked past, they saw that much of this place wasn't much different from Konoha, as they saw similar shops and people wearing similar clothing. What they did find different though was from time to time, they would pass a two-squad patrol that consisted of black armored samurai. Kakashi had to admit, the only reason why the samurai had come close to dying in the east was because of a quick change, and that change can easily have an opposite if another shinobi war took place. Akamaru, Kiba's partner, didn't like the crowded streets, which could be easily told by his whining. Must because of the small room available. Kiba did his best to comfort his canine companion. So Kakashi, do you know where we are going? Kurenai asked. Kakashi turned his head to face her. Yes, all we need to do is to turn right at the next corner, then we will be at our destination, the Jonin replied. Kurenai suddenly felt fast movement, and quickly spun around, gathering the other members' attention. What's wrong, sensei? Sakura asked. She got her answer when she saw a group of about 10 samurai running towards them. Stop right there, one of them yelled. The Konoha team got into a defensive stance. All around them the civilians tried to get away from the group, making a large circle around them. The samurai encircled the group, spears drawn and pointing towards them. Kiba growled, and was about to charge, but a hand from Sakura stopped him. No, if you attack, it could make matters worse, she pleaded. Kiba understood, and decided not to attack. They were here for an alliance, not to make war. You will come with us. Konoha ninja. The team froze. They had been caught. Before anything else happened, a black hole appeared in the ground near the samurai. A hooded, robed figure appeared from it. The sight of him caused the crowd to muttering to one another. It's one of the sentinels. The emperor's eyes and ears. What is one of them doing here? All the muttering stopped when they felt a wave of demonic killing intent. But to Konoha it felt all too familiar, especially to Kakashi. No, it couldn't be. They got their answer from a loud demonic roar, and suddenly a giant red fox of about 8 feet crashed to the ground, landing next to the seeker. It had 9 tails. The ninja from Konoha were now paralyzed in fright at the sight of an ancient adversary. Kyuubi, Sakura muttered. How was this possible? The fox burst into flames, and as quickly as it appeared, it died down, revealing a tall red-haired man in a red suit. Kyuubi-sama, one of the samurai yelled, standing at attention. The other followed his example. The fox-turned man gazed upon the ninja, and sneered with disgust. Just like Konoha to just walk into places uninvited, as if they own the place, though his voice was soft, his tone was harsh. Kiba was the first to recover, and retorted. What's it to you, demon? Or should I say Naruto? The crowd started to murmur, what is he talking about? Kyuubi growled in annoyance. This boy truly was a fool. Let me tell you this once, fool. Naruto and I are completely separate in titles. Don't get the jailer mixed up with the prisoner. Kiba was in shock. Naruto wasn't the Kyuubi. The demon signed in what seemed to be boredom. At any rate, His Imperial Majesty has asked me to bring you to him alive and in one piece. Trust me, if he ordered it, I would kill you all in a heartbeat. The team looked hopeful. The Emperor wanted to see them. But they did know, however, it was all for the wrong reasons. Kyuubi turned to the sentinel standing next to him. Could you open us a portal to the palace? He asked. The seeker complied by summoning a large rift for them to travel through. Kakashi nodded to his team. They would go quietly. They were, after all, uninvited guests in another land. Without any force they walked through the portal, the Kyuubi in tow. They could only stare in awe at the sight they gazed upon. The architecture of the palace was nothing they ever saw before. It truly was fit for the emperor. The building easily overshadowed nearly every other in the whole city, it was that large. Kyuubi turned to the ninjas. I don't know what your purpose is for coming here, but I should warn you, know that His Majesty is not happy with your little infiltration of his lands. He spoke with a serious tone. The large gates in front of them opened, allowing them entry into the palace. Come, he ordered, and they all obeyed. They had to if they wanted to see the emperor. Behind them were 10 samurai who were similar to the ones encountered in the city, but wore a dark yellow armor instead of black. It seems they were here to help escort them to the emperor. They could tell they were not well trusted, for obvious reasons shown. As they walked through the grand halls, they noticed the amount of guards, which stood at attention through the palace. Unlike the town guards who wore black armor, these men were colored in what seemed to be a golden yellow dye. Considering this was the seat of power for the emperor, this amount of men stationed in the palace was only natural to protect him, and the difference in color clearly showed these men were in a different league. They also couldn't help but look at the decorated paintings of who they believed to be heroes and well-authoritative figures in the empire. One of which was in fact the Kyuubi in human form. Hinata broke the silence. Kyuubi. The demon turned his head to see the Hyuga. Could I ask why someone such as yourself would serve the emperor? To his surprise, her eyes held little fear, and could only chuckle in response. I have my reasons, dear Hinata, which you will see soon enough. The ninja made their own conclusion. Whoever was the emperor was powerful enough to gain a demon lord as his ally. They also knew that if they ever did go to war with the empire, they would easily lose. Finally they came to a pair of decorated doors, a guard on each side. Kyuubi nodded to the guards, who saluted in response. His Majesty is waiting inside, Kyuubi-sama. Kyuubi nodded, and turned to the Konoha sent team. I would advise you to watch your mouths. The threat was more directed at Kiba and Sakura more than anyone else, much to their confusion. The doors were opened, and they slowly walked through. What they laid eyes upon was a grand hall, the walls a golden color and great design that was lost in the east. They could see many people in the hall, all stopping their conversations to see who was it that came into the hall of the emperor. From the clothes they wore they could tell they were important. They walked along a large red carpet, which traveled all the way to some steps. Beside each side of the sides was two large, golden statues, one of a dragon, the other of a phoenix. On top of the steps was an elaborate throne of exalted design and architect. Sat on the throne was arguably the most powerful man on the whole continent, the Emperor of the West. Flanking the Emperor were 12 large figures in ornate armor, wielding large halberds and standing at attention. Said Emperor looked angry with the party. But that wasn't what shocked them all to the core. It can't be, Sakura muttered to herself, deep in distress on who sat on the seat of power. Even now Konohagakure seems to scorn my existence. By sending you to my lands, the figure spoke, his voice filled with venom. Kakashi finally managed to regain his voice, but still only able to mutter but a single word. Naruto.